You probably already know that I make videos about all kinds of things, but especially things I love. I love moss. Anything with mezcal in it, or just plain mezcal. One great thing about living in Eugene was that good Thai food was everywhere. So it came as no surprise to me that at some point I would make a video about one of my favorite shows in a long, long time. You guessed it, Ted Lasso. So this video is my Ted Lasso theory. It is not a theory about what's going to happen next in Ted Lasso. I do have a few of those, but by the time I post this, we'll know our answers by then. Nor is it a theory about how Ted Lasso is actually in the same world as Caddyshack and is connected to How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. If anyone has a theory like that, please do share it with me. Instead, this is a theory about what makes Ted Lasso what it is, why it's taken off the way it has, and why so many people are getting so much out of the show. Anyway, what I do know is this. Friday nights this summer have been Ted Lasso nights, and that has just been a perfect little treat for me at the end of long weeks that I've come to look forward to. A lot of people don't know that Ted Lasso's origin story is actually quite old. I think it was like around 2013. That was whenever NBC Sports Network began getting the rights to broadcast the Premier League and various matches, and they hired the marketing firm Brooklyn Brothers to promote it.
We were challenged with bringing the world sport to America's network and generating mass appeal for English football in the States.
They brought in Jason Sudeikis to promote it with his character of an American coach in London, Coach Lasso.
We needed someone to speak to them on their terms. After all, it's football, just not as you know it.
Tottenham Hotspurs, you manage it.
Any team I coach, they're going to play hard for all 4 quarters, okay?
2 halves.
Okay, halves.
It really does feel like a rough draft for what he eventually became. You know, all the gags are about the differences between American football and soccer football, and you can see some of these jokes that get carried from these ads over to the first season.
Who's orange shoes there?
Gareth Bale.
That's Gareth Bale. Where he's from? He's from England?
Wales.
Wales? Wait, that's another country?
Yes and no.
How many countries are in this country?
4.
So these fellas are from all over the place?
I'm open, boyo.
Well, I mean, he must be from England, yeah?
Wales.
Is that another country?
Yes and no.
How many countries are in this country? 4. Kind of like America these days.
I started hearing about Ted Lasso on social media, and this is at a time where having an experience that's culturally shared that also makes us laugh, I'm talking about like a universally loved comedy, feels largely absent. So, you know, it seems like every decade has its collection of movies and shows that just make such an impact on culture that we're repeating their lines and their catchphrases and their gags for a long, long time.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
You can think of all the ones from 80s movies. I grew up in the 90s and we had so many examples of this.
We had man hands. Alrighty then. I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell.
And when I was in high school in the 2000s, you still saw these catchphrases take off.
I'm Ron Burgundy?
I declare bankruptcy!
Changed your name to McLovin? McLovin?
Something happened over the past decade where comedies just stopped having a major impact on culture. According to IMDb, these were the top 5 comedies of the 2010s. Now, first of all, way fewer people have seen these comedies compared to, like, I don't know, Caddyshack or Superbad or whatever. Also, these 3 here are, like, almost too serious to be considered outright comedies. I like Booksmart, I like The Big Sick, but, you know, they don't have the cultural weight of an Anchorman, of a Groundhog Day, of a Hangover. In other words, it's almost like we're living in a humorless era. And I've heard people explain this economically because movie studios are so heavily influenced by revenue. They're looking at films that'll bring in a lot of ticket sales, not just domestically, but also internationally. A big movie market like China plays a role. And so that's why you see studios invest more in things like blockbuster action films and, superhero movies, because you're pretty much guaranteed a good return on investment. But comedy's harder because humor doesn't translate across cultures all the time. But look, that's the economic explanation. For me, it's still hard to overlook that the disappearance of comedy, which is has been this humongous genre for my entire life, overlaps with the increasing awareness of climate change and division and authoritarianism around the world and all those things. Throughout this time, we've seen comedies disappear, but we've also seen a surge of interest in content that's soothing and positive and just gentle. While the early 2000s gave us stuff like American Idol, which got popular largely through making fun of its auditioners and Simon Cowell's harshness, the 2010s brought us interest in things like the Great British Bake Off.
Why is it so hard? It's rock hard.
But it is definitely a banoffee pie.
Tick.
You have all the elements. Is that your first attempt at it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good.
Oh, well done.
We saw a resurgence of interest in people who just seem to embody kindness and gentleness, people like Bob Ross or Fred Rogers or, I don't know, Paddington.
It's you I like. It's not the things you wear.
There's just a real appetite for people overcoming their differences and just being decent to each other.
Have fun tonight.
I will.
You're gonna be great. Just be calm. I miss you.
All right, I know we don't really want to go back there, but let's do a quick flashback of summer 2020. The whole world is spiraling. You have police brutality, you have political chaos, you have this pandemic that's got everybody trapped inside their homes, and it's almost impossible to look away from the heaviness of everything. It's almost like someone's just pinning you down, forcing you to watch all this. Then Ted Lasso comes along, and I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time going into the premise, but basically this American football coach is asked to come over to the UK to coach a Premier League team. Its owner is going through a divorce and is kind of sabotaging her own team. If you've ever seen the movie Major League, it's that kind of situation. Anyway, Ted shows up and he's like this parody of John Wooden, just inspirational quotes and wild positivity and optimism. In many ways, he's like an American engineered to drive English people nuts about everything about Americans that just drives them up a wall. He's the package deal of it. But bit by bit, he manages to win them all over with his relentless positivity. I've heard so many people explain away the appeal of Ted Lasso as it's just such a feel-good show. It's exactly what we need in this really difficult moment, that positivity, that relentless optimism. But when I hear the show's popularity explained away as just Ted is so nice and our world needs niceness and positivity right now, I don't actually think that's it. I mean, this isn't exactly a new thing. We've seen unbreakable optimists and positivity and sincerity on screen. We've seen the trope where just this pure of heart nice person enters this mean and grizzled world and they're just all out of place, but they save the day with their niceness. So we've seen all of this, but why does Ted Lasso feel especially needed and unique right now? Like, this show is landing with people at such a deep level. I ran into the Reddit page for Ted Lasso, and so many of the conversations there are like these full-blown therapeutic journaling sessions. I don't often see that from fan pages for shows, but this one clearly has hit a chord. One of my many creative theories is that art that works, stories that resonate, don't really reveal to us new information. They don't have new things to teach us. They just show us stuff we already knew. Truths that we probably accept intellectually, but that are harder to remember in the throes of day-to-day life. I think that a show, a song, a piece of art will resonate with us when the themes and messages in that thing are so in sync with our own experiences. And so I think Ted Lasso's popularity isn't just because it's a great show, but it's an indicator of what a lot of people are going through. First of all, niceness isn't enough. Now, this flies directly in the face of people's impression that Ted Lasso is just a show about niceness or positivity. Of course, some of the first words people would associate with the character of Ted or with his show are optimistic, positive, nice, and he is ridiculously patient with other people who don't immediately accept him for who he is, with people who are just outright mean to him. And the show shows us the payoff of this patience and of making generous assumptions.
Because I'm trying to think of a reason you didn't put your hand in with the rest of the team.
Didn't want to.
I gotta say, man, sometimes you remind me of my grandma with the channel hopper. You just push all the wrong buttons.
But one thing I've been learning a lot about lately is the difference between kindness and niceness. And these things seem synonymous, but they're really not. Niceness is about how other people feel and making them feel good, whereas kindness is focused on what is good and what's right for all people involved. Sometimes they overlap, but not always. There are several points where we see Ted having to make a hard decision to go against his desire to just simply be nice to people, especially his players. He does things he knows will upset them, like benching a star player for being a bully, or letting the bully back onto the team even though he knows it would upset other players. But he does this because it's not necessarily nice, but it's the right call in the long run. It's the kind thing to do.
Jamie Tot, Jamie Tot,
As undeniably catchy as that tune is, I need you to cut the crap right now.
What on earth? He's taking off his best player, and with less than a minute remaining in the half.
Number 9, Jamie Todd.
Hey, way to play out there. Way to get us back in.
Shut up. Fucking stupid spot.
And what's cool is even though Ted is the nice guy of the show, we see a lot of other characters demonstrate kindness in their own way, without the vestige of niceness. These examples detach our assumption that niceness and kindness are one and the same, and that in order to be a kind person, you have to just be like this smiley, feel-good individual. Another thing I really appreciate is that the show shows us the limitations of Ted's sunny outlook, and it shows what it looks like when these flip from being a strength to becoming a liability. Last summer, so this was right when the first few episodes of Ted Lasso were being released, the Washington Post put out this great op-ed called Time to Ditch Toxic Positivity. And I loved what this article had to say. Looking on the bright side in the face of tragedy or dire situation, illness, homelessness, food insecurity, unemployment, or racial injustice is a privilege that not all of us have. Promulgating messages of positivity denies a very real sense of despair and hopelessness, and it may only serve to alienate and further isolate those who are already struggling. We judge ourselves for feeling pain, sadness, fear, which then produces feelings of things like shame and guilt. We end up just feeling bad about feeling bad. It actually stalls any healing or progress or problem solving. I think you see an op-ed like this take off because so many people have experienced the harmful side of toxic positivity being thrown at them and not validating what they're going through. And we've seen this from Ted Lasso a lot too, especially in some of the recent episodes. We see a storyline where he really needs to help himself before he's back in a position where he can help others. And he goes to his counseling sessions and just hides behind jokes and empty optimism, and it's kind of painful to watch, but I think I especially noticed all the ways that hits close to home for me.
This is interesting.
What is? Am I answered the fountainhead? I know, curveball, right? But I can explain.
No, what you're doing here. This is obviously your way of connecting with new people. Makes sense. It's very disarming.
As much as Ted Lasso is a positive show, it doesn't put positivity up on a pedestal just for positivity's own sake. It prioritizes emotional health and wholeness, and that's something I like. Another big thing the show reminds us of is that everyone is going through something. You know, I think in any well-written show, every character is engaged in their own little struggle, and even if it's not written into the script, an actor will try and put that into their portrayal. But I think Ted Lasso takes an extra step of actually unpacking this concept a bit further, because you can take almost any character from the show and any of their behaviors, whether positive or negative, and you'll see how these are influenced so strongly by some of the most painful experiences they've had. There are a lot of instances where Ted is just surrounded by bad behavior. You know, people are just outright mean to him. There's these ego-driven feuds in his locker room. And while he doesn't tolerate people's bad behavior when it affects others, he also does a great job of not rushing in to fix people. And I love seeing that.
Doesn't surprise me, though. You've had a heck of a career.
Thank you. Never thought it would end being coached by Ronald fucking McDonald.
You know, no one likes a show that's preachy, but Ted Lasso can kind of get away with it more just because it's baked into the character of Ted and it's one of his quirks. One of the more overt messages it sends is the value of being curious rather than judgmental.
But then one day I was driving my little boy to school and I saw this quote by Walt Whitman. It was painted on the wall there. It said, "Be curious, not judgmental." I like it. So I get back in my car and I'm driving to work, and all of a sudden it hits me. All them fellas that used to belittle me, not a single one of them were curious.
Ooh, so talk about something I'm trying to be better at doing, right? It's so easy to read people's snarky tweets or hear their snide comments and to just start thinking the worst of them, to start just dismissing them. And I think it's human to have those reactions, but I also think they're harmful in the long run and they don't lead to the kind of world I want to live in. You know, I don't want to justify it when people say unacceptable things, but I think even our ability to confront people in a healthy and productive way is better served by being curious about where these things come from, rather than just dismissing them as this person's just terrible. Speaking of which, Ted Lasso is a great showcase of how your biggest strengths are connected to your biggest weaknesses. This is something I believe pretty deeply. All the best things about you correspond with some of the things you need to work on the most. I gave the example of how Ted's positivity serves him well but can also set him back, and pretty much every character in the show has their own version of this. Roy is gruff and moody, but he's also perhaps the show's most consistently honest character and true to himself. Coach Beard, he's like the ultimate wingman, but it's also clear that he struggles with codependency. I think if you want to write a great character, you've got to understand this inverted relationship between people's strengths and weaknesses, but even if you're not a fiction writer, just understanding this about yourself is really valuable. The show does a good job of showing that we can't just be complacent leaning into our strengths, but we all also have to do our work. So I'm married to a therapist and we watch movies together. I don't know why I'm saying it like that's a rare thing. I'm assuming most people watch movies with their partner. But where I'm going with this is that watching movies with Deanna has made me realize that like 90% of therapy scenes in movies and shows are just absolutely ridiculous. You see stuff in those scenes that you would never see a real life therapist do. You would never see in a real world therapy session. And you know, often they're just like writers kind of taking the lazy approach for doing actual character exposition. But that's not the case in Ted Lasso. Therapy is not portrayed as just this miracle fix, but the show does demonstrate the value it can offer to helping us see things with more clarity. There's also this huge theme, especially in the second season, about fatherhood and fathers and the way different characters have dealt with the repercussions of having absent, abusive, or otherwise flawed father figures. And I love that they're going there. It's such a commonplace wound in our world, and I think the way that these characters are having to work through these effects could end up being healing for a lot of people. Sometimes I'll joke that a show like this can be like incognito therapy in disguise for a lot of people. I don't mean to say that this should ever take the place of therapy in your life, but I think about, how getting help can be so stigmatized sometimes, and how our systems can also make it unnecessarily complicated or difficult to access for a lot of people. So I think it's worthwhile and valuable for things that are meant for entertainment to actually include healing truths and examples and to show us what they look like. All right, that's the theory. I've heard a mixed reaction from a lot of people about the show's second season, actually. Some people think it's wildly different than the first. I actually think it just takes the best things about the show's first season and it goes deeper with them. They've taken way more risks. I think most have been successful, but they're not playing it safe. I think when you see it as more than just a show about, kill them with kindness, you get more of what season 2 has to offer. Thanks for watching this. A lot of my videos are on nature, culture, travel, adventure, storytelling, and unpacking what makes a good story, but really I kind of just try and make videos about the things I love. And so, yeah, follow along for more. Stay tuned, like, subscribe, do all those nice things, kind things, bit of both. And I'll see you on the next one.